This is a breakdown of Star Wars The Acolyte, episodes 1 and 2. As a series set at the end of the High Republic era, about 100 years before the events of the prequels, this show is blazing its own trail as a Sith murder mystery revolving around a cover-up of a scandalous Jedi crime. I'm digging it so far, and I'm gonna break down these first 2 episodes scene by scene for all the Star Wars Easter eggs and the attention to detail that you might have missed. Okay, the Lucasfilm opening fanfare shows lightsaber glares off of droids and metallic helmets, the mask of Darth Vader, then BB-8, then C-3PO, then Kylo Ren, then R2-D2, then a Rebel pilot helmet, then an Imperial Scout Trooper helmet, then a Stormtrooper helmet, and then a Mandalorian T-Visor helmet, presumably that of Din Djarin. Then pale blue opening text establishes, 100 years before the rise of the Empire, it is a time of peace. The Jedi Order and the Galactic Republic have prospered for centuries without war, but in the dark quarters of the galaxy, a powerful few learn to use the Force in secret. One of them, a lone assassin, risks discovery to seek revenge. Okay, a few things here. The text is pale blue, sans serif, and over a space backdrop, just like a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. It even has a 4-period ellipsis, just like that text does, which is just a nice touch.
Cute.
Now, previously we were told that this series was set about 100 years before Phantom Menace, which is not necessarily the same thing as 100 years before the rise of the Empire. Because the Empire technically began in 19 BBY, which is when Order 66 went out and the Jedi Purge began, which in Star Wars Rebels is what the Empire celebrates as Empire Day, which is also Ezra Bridger's birthday. Phantom Menace is set 13 years before that in 32 BBY. It's a small distinction, but if the Acolyte is set in 119 BBY versus 132 BBY, it could make a difference on which prequel era characters might appear or be born during the timeline of the series. Sheev Palpatine, for example, has a listed birth year of 84 BBY, and while we do not expect him to appear in this series, for Pablo Hidalgo and the Lucasfilm Story Group to say that Sheev's reported birth date was an apocryphal rounding error by 35 years instead of 48 years just might be an easier leap for them to make. I'm probably overthinking this, but that is what we do here at New Rockstars. The High Republic is a relatively recent era of Star Wars fiction that was rolled out by Lucasfilm starting in 2020 with phases of books and comics and references in the Jedi Survivor game and even the Young Jedi Adventures. But the Acolyte is the first ever live action series set during this era. The High Republic runs from about 500 BBY to around now, which is 100 years before the prequels. The first books included Charles Soule's Light of the Jedi, Kevin Scott's The Rising Storm, and Claudia Gray's The Fallen Star. Those are set 100 years before the Acolyte. We learned the 2 major historical tragedies of that era, spoiler warning for these books, the Great Hyperspace Disaster of 232 BBY and the destruction of the Starlight Beacon space station in 230 BBY. That first disaster was a result of a transport ship, the Legacy Run, nearly colliding in hyperspace with a Nihil storm ship. The Nihil are a fleet of Viking-like pirates led by Marchion Ro, sending a debris field hurtling toward planets. This was an era when hyperspace lanes are still being charted. And then 2 years after this, the Nihil stage a terrorist strike on the Starlight Beacon, which was a key symbol of hope for the Republic. But so far, the history detailed in these books hasn't really come up on the Acolyte. And that might be because this show was being developed before these books came out. But the exception is the inclusion of the character Vernestra Rwoh, a Mirialan Jedi who appears as a youth in Fallen Star, but appears in this series as an adult Jedi Master over 100 years old, played by Rebecca Henderson. Now, technically, Yoda is alive during this time, but the showrunner confirmed that we will not see Yoda on the season. It seems like they're using Master Vernestra as the green-skinned elder authority from the Jedi Temple. All you really need to know is that the Jedi are at the height of their authority when they were monkish peacekeepers who rarely drew their lightsabers, having emerged victors from a past war with the Sith centuries prior. While the Jedi thought the Sith were wiped out, the Sith secretly lived on in accordance to the rule of 2, a lineage of master and apprentice pairings. I was actually able to attend a press preview at Lucasfilm's offices in Burbank, watching the first episode with some other Star Wars experts that I really admire, and chat with the creator, Leslie Headland, about her influences and her creative process. And she kind of implied, based off of me reading between the lines, that she might have originally pitched Lucasfilm on an Asajj Ventress spinoff. And they ended up saying no to that, but they did like her take on this morally clouded Sith-oriented story, and they decided to set her pitch in the earlier High Republic era that they had in development. So when you watch this show, I think it's helpful to see it as May as Asajj, and then her mystery master figure as a Dooku figure serving some other master, like Dooku serving Sidious, and trying to recruit an apprentice of his own in order to overthrow his master. We angle down to the planet of Ueda as a hooded figure. May Anastasia, Amandla Stenberg, faces an island with a long rock bridge. Already some interesting details in May's appearance. Braids that cover a barely visible spiral marking on her forehead, chainmail armor hanging all over her robes, and ring-ended blades sheathed all over her midsection piece. She asks this beggar,
"Where's your Jedi?"
Yeah, she says your Jedi, because in this era, Jedi are stationed in outposts in various regions.
There's so many of them.
Priests of the Catholic Church set up in missions and parishes as a way to exert church authority all over the globe. This beggar wears this mask with this red-orange liquid sloshing around, which might be the same nutrient-rich fluid contained in the jars of the Bomar monk brains carried around by those spider droids on Tatooine, which is first shown in Return of the Jedi and appeared in the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 3. And if it reminds you of the peachy goo in the pods of the human farms of the Matrix, made up of the liquidated human remains, it's okay to draw that connection because, hey, we're about to see Carrie-Anne Moss. This establishment is a noodle bar. And in fact, Lucasfilm hooked me up with a cup of instant ramen with the actual logo of this joint made by Pablo Hidalgo Steam, which I also see as a Matrix parallel because in the first film, Neo points out his favorite noodle bar in the Matrix to Trinity. And in 2021's The Matrix Resurrections, Neo picks up food from San Francisco's House of Nanking, one of my favorite places to eat in the city, and it does have truly really good noodles. But these noodles cook on this awesome rotating apparatus where it looks like another cook ladles hot water on them whenever they reach the bottom, which has got to be a really great way to keep them perfectly al dente. But May confronts Master Indara, Carrie-Anne Moss, Trinity from The Matrix, and Jerry Hogarth from Jessica Jones. And while these other guys sit with her laugh, Indara silences them, never taking her eyes off May.
Attack me, Jedi.
Jedi do not attack the unarmed.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, a little clue that this is personal for May. The Jedi, including Master Indara, must have injured her some way. This entire series is about exposing the hypocrisy of the Jedi Order, that they are not as perfect as they come across. Indara slowly rises, letting May beat the crap out of all these guys that she was with. Not very good friends, I would imagine. But the guy whose blaster sticks in his holster has these awesome bands on his antlers with rings hanging off like earrings. Indara finally intervenes, and they fight with hand-to-hand combat that the show's production has called Force Fu, an uncommon fighting style in Star Wars, but one that brings more elegance to this era. Notice how Indara doesn't immediately ignite her lightsaber, but you'll notice May always reaches for it. Indara notices this too and gracefully turns her torso, giving us a look at her Jedi robes. Despite having less access to the High Republic stories, this show's production did have access to Lucasfilm's designs for the Jedi apparel during this era, and already we see how Indara's tan tunic is perfectly folded and pleated like a martial artist to allow for maximum flexibility and not to come undone. Even Indara's martial arts are mostly defensive. She always steps out of the way and blocks and uses the Force only to repel, but never ever strikes. May draws a metal blade and Indara stops it with the Force, and then May does this awesome move that happens so fast it's hard to notice it. She draws her other hand past it and summons that blade to her empty hand to try to lunge that into Indara's neck. So May knows the Force well enough to know that Indara is using the Force to restrain her arm, not the blade itself, so that she can fling that blade from one hand to the other and use that momentum of her other arm to get to her neck. And Indara barely blocks this one and spins May around, asking,
"Who trained you?"
Yeah, the answer might be right in front of Indara's face, just hidden perfectly by May's braids, the spiral marking on her forehead, which we know from poster art and the character names released pre-season matches that of Mother Anastasia and her coven, which I assume we will meet in a future episode. May realizes that the only move she really has against Indara is to target someone else, which is the tactic Count Dooku uses when he's unable to defeat Yoda in Attack of the Clones. Indara leaps up the stairway to the upper level, and we are seeing some really cool wire work similar to the Matrix films, but also in Kill Bill, when the bride fights the crazy 88 and goes up the levels of the stairs there too. Actually, the show's creator once pitched it as Kill Bill meets Frozen, which previously made no sense to me, but now after watching it, I get it. Indara uses the Force to catch the fall of the throned woman and then radios in this unidentified Force user, and then gets increasingly aggressive with May. But notice how when Indara has the opportunity to jab May, instead she grabs her arm and forces her to open up to her. Like even the combat is nurturing and protective of her combatant, but then ultimately Indara ends this round. One little cosmetic detail they added to Carrie-Anne Moss's face, these two little black dots to the right of her eye, it's like she uses these dots to disrupt people who try to look her in the eyes to maybe give her an edge in all tense encounters. Actually, in the trailer footage, the flashback on Indara from whatever the Brindog incident was, she only has one of those markings beside her eye. So I wonder if these dots could, for her, connote some type of experience level. But then Indara unmasks May.
You. What are you doing here?
Yeah, Indara reaches to move the braids, but May's like, I'm gonna show you my marking, my choice. And when the marking is revealed, you can hear a subtle female vocalization. I'm gonna say this was like a lullaby of one of May and Osha's mothers who died in that fire. After forcing Indara back, only now does Indara ignite her green lightsaber. Actually, in our Q&A with the creator, she was asked if the color green was a Matrix reference, and she said no, but Carrie-Anne Moss really does look natural in a green glow, doesn't she? Now, the pose that she strikes here is inspired by Iaido, as opposed to Kendo, and along with Western fencing, Kendo was a huge inspiration for the sword fighting in the original trilogy, but the Iaido approach is slower, more deliberate, and designed to quickly end a duel in just one strike. May thrusts her blade at the cook, forcing Indara to break her focus and try to stop it, giving May an in to sink her second blade in Indara's chest. Indara drops her hilt, and interestingly, May does not take the lightsaber. Indara's lightsaber is the same hilt that appears in that awesome poster for the series, with the hilt leaving a streak of blood, but May does not take it because the master she serves doesn't want her to use weapons at all. So yes, this is the last we see of Carrie-Anne Moss living, at least in this era. I assume we will see her in flashbacks of future episodes, but it's pretty insane to kill off who, in my opinion, might have been the biggest star of the series, reminding us of Scream and Psycho. It's a pretty bold move to open the series with. Now, May motions to kill the bar owner, but sees a child cowering by the leg and doesn't want to leave an orphan behind, likely because she too was an orphan left behind at some point. Either way, she's not all evil. We see the Acolyte logo with an O formed by two interlocking rings, one red, one blue, reflecting the two sisters of May and Osha. So the other sister, Osha, awakens. Now we know this is a different person right away because her hair, while also braided, is significantly shorter. You also notice it's a recurring thing on the show where the editing makes it seem like Osha is waking up from a dream where she would be seeing what her sister is doing. Now the name Osha might be a nod to the term Ashla, which is the pseudonym that Ahsoka Tano uses when she's in exile, but Ashla is also the word for the Force in the Lasat language, and it was also the term used for the light side of the Force by ancient Force-sensitive beings on Tython. And because this is a Star Wars, there also has to be an awesome little droid. This one is Pip, and I love him. If you look closely, there are some faded stickers on him. Now, the Lucasfilm team gave me fresh versions of these decals without saying what they are. So this one, obviously a Loth cat, but the blue jellyfish looking one is actually a blue version of the red sticker that's on Luke's training helmet in the 1977 film. Now, the checkerboard one with the writing, I'm less certain about. I was thinking maybe it's a pod racing sticker, or maybe even a swoop racing sticker from the Old Republic era. I did look into it, but this writing is not anything known to the Star Wars universe, but each of the letters are different characters. But if this one is a reference to Luke's helmet in A New Hope, this one could be a nod to Big Starklighter's checkerboard design helmet, and who knows, maybe the 9 letters spell out Dark Light. I don't know. So Osha works as a mech along with Philic on this Trade Federation freighter. She passes an early generation gonk droid. Philic says,
"It's the wild trip to Nar Shaddaa with the piloting crew." Nar
Shaddaa is a smuggler's moon used by the Hutts from their homeworld of Nal Hutta. Jabba the Hutt and his family are active at this point in history. So these two serve the Neimoidians, who later aligned with the Separatists during the Clone Wars. Osha and Philic spacewalk out to fix the shield generator, which is against Republic regulation to have sentient life forms do this. Remember, we see R2-D2 and the other astromech droids doing this kind of work in Phantom Menace. The Neimoidian says,
"Their grease grubbers are disposable.
Disgusting beings.
Our cargo is not."
Yeah, we never learned what this Trade Federation freighter is carrying, but Yord later says that this is the CorpSec region, which refers to the corporate sector, which is in the Outer Rim, governed by the Corporate Sector Authority, a fiefdom where corporations are allowed to govern their own territory. A pressure gauge goes awry and a fire begins to burn, using what oxygen in space? I don't know. But the fire takes Osha back to that traumatic memory where the closed captions reveals what people are saying in her head here. Yes, this is the memory of the fiery incident where both sisters assume the other died. A Jedi Vector starfighter flies past the freighter. Vectors are the small Jedi fighters that seat 1, maybe 2 occupants. They were actually created for the High Republic era. I love the Neimoidian response to this.
Jedi?
Now remember, Phantom Menace began with 2 Jedi arriving at a Trade Federation ship, and so too does this series. And we meet these 2 Jedi.
My name is Yord Fandar, Knight of the Jedi Order, and this is my Padawan, Tassiloa.
Yord is played by Charlie Barnett, who previously worked on Russian Doll with Leslie Headland, and Tassiloa is a Zygerian race. This is the first time we've seen a Zygerian in live action. They were first mentioned in a 1987 Star Wars source book, and were considered obscure EU creatures until Clone Wars, when they appear as part of the Slaves of the Republic story arc in the Clone Wars comic series, which became 3 episodes of the animated Clone Wars, Kidnapped, Slaves of the Republic, and Escape from Kadavo. The Zygerians were known for a vast empire built upon a slave trade until the Jedi and the Republic went to war with them and outlawed it, but they openly revived their slave trade when they allied with the Separatists in the Clone Wars. Now, something weird happens with the audio mix here.
This is my Padawan, Tassiloa. We are looking for a former Jedi by the name of Osha Anaseya.
Yeah, we are looking for a former Jedi was definitely ADR'd in after the fact. Maybe because however they originally described Osha was just like confusing and they wanted to clarify Osha's past with the Jedi Order. Once again, the High Republic robes worn by these characters are so
beautiful,
pristine
like
with white atop gold.
The
And
gold
notice
and
above
white
and
is
below their
beautiful.
brown belts are these colored sashes that reflect what color their lightsabers are. This color coding applies specifically to Padawans, as in the case of Tassi Loa here.
Such a
She
good
must have a blue
detail.
lightsaber. But in the case of knights and masters, the sash changes to white or other darker colors based on the occasion. Yord uses a bit of Jedi mind control
This
to
was so
force the
cool to
Neimoidian
see.
to stop lying, which feels a bit like problematic Force confession to me. Osha finds Yord in a room and he
I
sits up
loved it.
suddenly, fanning out his cape so that it doesn't crease. Later, we see him steaming his robe like a big nerd. He's so
love
conscious
this.
about his robes wrinkling, but part of that paranoia may be so that he could quick draw his lightsaber without his wrinkled robe snagging on anything,
That
which we
makes
see
sense.
happening here as he reaches
That
for the
makes
lightsaber
sense.
just as Osha's grabbing Pip. He's like a trigger-happy cop. So we learned that Osha left the Jedi Order 6 years prior, reminding us of Ahsoka at the end of Season 5 of Clone Wars and the Season 7 arc when she works blue-collar jobs for the Martez sisters. Remember that? We also learned that Osha joined the Order when she was 8 years old, which is old for the Jedi Order. They like to get them when they're like 2 or 3 years old.
That's
And
not
we
so
learned that
bad.
she was in mourning at the time, which made things tough for her. Also, some parallels to Anakin Skywalker, of course, who joined the Jedi Order when he was 9 years old and had enough memories of a loving mother
The
whom he
goat.
would miss, and then later in Attack of the Clones, he entered a state of mourning. We also learned that Master Indara was the Jedi who advised the Council to discontinue her training, but in Osha's mind, she left the Order voluntarily. But for Yord, that's enough of a motive. And then he brings in the witness, the barkeep, to identify her. Now, there's a bit of a logic issue here. If vector ships carry only 2 Jedi maximum, how did the barkeep get here? Did he arrive with that prisoner transport ship? And then when they leave, since he wouldn't be able to fit in the vector and was not on the prisoner transport ship, did he just stay with the Neimoidians? Why does he need to be here at all? I just think the fact that they dragged him here is very, very funny. Like, who's babysitting his kid? On to Coruscant. We see Coruscant during the High Republic era, and it looks awesome. When you compare this shot of the Jedi Temple with any other shot of the Jedi Temple from the prequel era, the cityscape around the temple is now 100 years prior, much
That
lower,
looks-
less developed, and you can actually see
That's so
visible
true.
trees. Coruscant is less of a
Still
towering metropolis
building.
back at this point in
Oh,
history,
something
and
so
I
nice
love that
about
attention
that.
to detail. We meet Master Sol, Li Zhongjie, who you might know from Squid Game. In Latin, the word soul, S-O-L, translates to sun, and his opening words embody the power of clarity.
Close your eyes. Your eyes can deceive you. We must not trust them.
Many of the characters in this series make snap judgments based on appearances while missing a deeper truth about them. I really appreciate the mix of humans and non-human species reflected in this room. This first kid is a Tarsunt from the planet Tarsunt. Other Tarsunts we know of in Star Wars include Senator Calandris in the Galactic Republic from the Obi-Wan and Anakin comics, and then Landiver Velicham from the New Republic, who we saw in Force Awakens when Starkiller Base wiped out Hosnian Prime. Master Sol describes the Force as a vast ocean, echoing the water imagery we saw in Luke's training of Rey in The Last Jedi. The younglings describe the Force
Balance.
Good.
Life.
Excellent.
I see fire. It grows larger. It consumes anything that tries to stop it.
Uh-oh. Sol says that all forces of nature embody different aspects of the Force, but there's definitely a look of worry on his face. I interpret this as this youngling sensing in Master Sol the fire that haunts him, and how, while pursuing a noble aim of spreading the Jedi way to children, to do that would mean burning the bridges those kids have to their families. Sol's fear is that the Jedi are another kind of destructive force, and while the sun, Sol, can bring warmth and clarity, it's also a burning ball of fire. Master Vernestra Rowe, played by Rebecca Henderson, tells Sol about Osha's arrest. Now, she is a Mirialan race, which is the same race as Luminara Unduli and Barriss Offee. The book Fallen Star shows Vern in her youth when she carried a lightsaber that she modified into a light whip, and this series will later show that whip in action. On the prisoner transport, this convict is latched with a Dybbuk, which is a parasitic
Disgusting.
creature that subdues criminals with terrifying visions, reminding me of the facehugger from Alien.
Yeah.
And Leslie Headland did confirm that there is going to be like an alien-themed episode coming up, but the term Dybbuk comes from Jewish mythology. It's a malicious possessing spirit from the soul of a dead person. Its name
Damn.
coming from the Hebrew of Davak, which means to adhere or cling. You may
Okay.
have heard of the urban legend of the Dybbuk box. Osha asks how they're gonna stage an escape if they are currently traveling through hyperspace, saying that taking escape pods could kill them, perhaps recalling the history of the great hyperspace disaster in the Legacy Run in 232 BBY. A third convict has these cybernetic implants. It kind of reminds me of the cyborg Lobot from The Empire Strikes Back, or even the concept of the decraniated who showed up in Rogue One and Solo. This guy hacks into the droid pilots, and I love how these guys just practically transform back into
again.
pilot seats. And they time that practical transition with the light outside of the spacecraft to just synchronize this moment of the transport exiting hyperspace. And also, does that mean that these droids are just constantly having to deal with wardens sitting on them and farting into them? So the others break free, leaving Osha behind, and there is this key moment where she reaches out to try to force pull Pip, but she fails. And thank God she fails, because she even is force sensitive. She should be able to pull it, but she's just that removed from the Jedi Order that she's not
similar
as
to
sensitive anymore.
when I saw this, I was thinking that's similar, and this is when I was convinced that she wasn't the same person as the assassin that killed Master Indara. It's like how it happened in Obi-Wan, when Obi-Wan was starting to try and tap into the Force again. But he couldn't because he'd been so out of it. So this is when I was confirmed, okay, she's the same person. But while it happens, it's out of practice. She's rusty. You need to train again.
Or that she's lost some of these abilities, and it's just such a nice change of pace because it seems like in Star Wars these days, everyone is force sensitive. And this is just further proof that Osha could not have been the sister to kill Master Indara. But she's able to get out, and she has the option to save herself, but humanely turns back to save this prisoner. This first episode is very much inspired by the amazing 1993 film The Fugitive, and this beat parallels the falsely accused Dr. Richard Kimball rushing to get out of the prisoner bus before the train crashes into them, but heroically deciding to save the injured guard despite everyone else leaving them to die. And Osha's frozen crash site on Karlak echoes the cold wilderness that Kimball has to flee through. We meet Master Soul's new Padawan, Jecki Lawn, played by Daphne Keene, X-23, Laura from Logan. She and Soul discuss whether keeping images of old relationships amounts to toxic sentimentality, or whether it's just meditating on the past to avoid repeating mistakes. Either way, it's another example of the Jedi tradition of severing all family ties and emotional relationships really robs them of emotional context in which to make good decisions. And it is wild to me that the Jedi Temple in this era has a detainment level. Like it's—
No, but wait. No, I disagree. But robbing Jedi of emotional context to make decisions, emotional clouds logic. Most of the time it's arguable that you need logic to make good decisions, not more emotional. The reason Anakin fell to the dark side was because emotional, because he wanted to save his wife and child, which isn't a bad thing, but what ended up happening is a bad thing. So it's bad to cut all ties. It's such a gray area. It's such a... I don't know. I still don't know where I fall on that. I don't know if it's good that Jedi cut off all... try to sever all ties or not. I don't know.
The school with prison cells on the ground floor. What does that say about them right now? Like, we don't know if these prisoners specifically violated like Jedi laws or anything like that. They're just happy to keep prisoners in their school. Soul asks to bring Osha in himself, and Vern says to be discreet. Seems like her primary concern is a political scandal, and maybe that's why they substituted in this character for Yoda as like the temple authority figure on the show. Like Lucasfilm maybe just didn't want to muddy Yoda's backstory in this era with some political flop sweat to just not change any of the context that he enters Phantom Menace with. As Osha explores the crash site, I love this shot. It's a solid jump scare, and what's creepiest is that they not only timed this young May to jump into the frame quickly, they somehow pulled it off without leaving any footprints in the snow. Similarly, when Osha later chases young May through the snow, no footprints. In this vision, May transports Osha from the ice of Karlak to the fire of Brendok and leads her on this chase to what I assume was their childhood home. And notice there are 2 bunks, each with parallel plush balls. And then she chants this creepy rhyme. You're with me, I'm with you. Always one, but born as 2. As above sits the stars, and below lies the sea.
I give you you,
and you give me me.
Yeah, I let them deliver the last line of it because semantically, only one sister is giving the other herself. Like, it's possible that they both chanted this simultaneously when they were girls, but when they repeat it here, May is the one saying, I give you you, and Osha is saying, and you give me me. Only May is giving Osha Osha. Osha is not giving May May. I'm sorry if this confuses you. I just bring it up because it implies that May, as a dark side practitioner of the 2 sisters, is offering the presumably weaker sister a chance to discover her true inner power. Actually, in our roundtable discussion, Leslie Headland talked a lot about the Gemini zodiac sign represented by the twins, Castor and Pollux. It also came up in the room that Lucasfilm president Kathleen Kennedy is not only a twin, but being born on June 5th, she and her twin sister Connie are Geminis. That's their zodiac sign. So I don't know, this just might be a concept that Leslie and Kathleen talked a lot about when they were developing the show. This series could identify Osha and May as a Force dyad. This concept was established in The Rise of Skywalker. It refers to a cosmic connection between two Force-sensitive individuals in which together they can transcend their physical beings and access abilities like Force healing, communication across great distances, and instantly teleporting objects to each other. Palpatine wants both Rey and Kylo because they're Force dyads. My theory is that this mystery Sith wants May and Osha for the same reason, and that those four Jedi might have actually separated these sisters for that reason as well, because together they were just too powerful to contain and could have been exploited by some nefarious entities out there. But in that separation, they ended up making a way bigger mess that they all carry the guilt of. But Osha wakes up from this vision back in the crashed ship, suggesting that everything she saw from the moment she previously woke up and looked out at Karlak was part of that vision. It's pretty unnerving to realize that your waking up within a dream was actually part of that dream. It kind of makes you paranoid that in this moment you could still be asleep. Meanwhile, on the ship with Sol, Jecki, and Yord, a production design detail I really appreciate is how all the tech aboard these ships has rounded edges. We see pale white and seafoam and red walls, these control panels with these big old knobs on them. In 1977, George Lucas and his team aimed for a lived-in, dirty, greasy sci-fi look, reflecting the themes prevalent in America in the 1970s. Dysfunction, industrial pollution, economic depression. But this series goes back a decade or two before that. It takes design influences from what we call the retro-futurist aesthetic, that before it was retro was just what was considered sci-fi art in the 1950s and 1960s. This is when artists still had a sunnier view of the future. That's actually what the Disney Imagineers used to design Tomorrowland. So it's just like a nice way to distinguish this older era from what we know most famously as Star Wars. It also predates the clean green screen opulence of the prequel trilogy. But Sol reveals to the others that Osha did have a twin.
I didn't know Osha was a twin.
It's not in her file.
Notice how Sol shifts his eyes like he didn't intend to say this out loud. We're getting a sense of like how messy this conspiracy was, how rushed the cover-up was. Sol, Yord, and Jecki follow the trail of Osha through the narrow cave that leads to a cliff, and yes, we get another fugitive reference here. The iconic moment when Tommy Lee Jones chases Harrison Ford in the drainage tunnel and the dam.
I didn't do it!
I didn't kill my wife! I don't care!
Similarly, Sol implicitly knows that Osha is innocent and doesn't cuff her when he saves her, just like Tommy Lee Jones takes off Harrison Ford's cuffs in the final scene of The Fugitive. Now, Yord's lightsaber is yellow, a color not commonly seen throughout Star Wars. It was used mostly for Temple Guardians in flashbacks and Rebels, and increasingly characters like Asajj Ventress and Bad Batch, Rey at the end of Rise of Skywalker. Really, to reflect the variety of the High Republic era, this series is widening the spectrum of lightsaber colors. The final scene of this episode takes us to this rocky shoreline. May's mystery Sith says in a distorted voice under a mask, "The Jedi live in a dream they believe everyone shares. If you attack a Jedi with a weapon, you will fail. Steel or laser are no threat to them."